Welcome back. As President Obama wrapped up his historic chat with House Republicans today, he made a last-ditch effort to appeal to their better angels, I guess. He urged them, as he did during the beginning of his speech, to work with him, not against him, something liberals have been telling him to give up on, but which this president says he is still after.
If we're going to frame these debates in ways that allow us to solve them, then we can't start off by figuring out, A, who's to blame, B, how can we make the American people afraid of the other side? And unfortunately, that's how our politics works right now. That's how a lot of our discussion works. That's how we start off. Every time somebody speaks in Congress, the first thing they do, they stand up and all the talking points, I see Frank Lutz up here sitting in the front. He's already polled it, and he said, the way you're really going to, I've done a focus group, and, the way we're going to really box in Obama on this one or make Pelosi look bad on that one. I know, I like Frank. We've had conversations between Frank and I, but that's how we operate. It's all tactics, and it's not solving problems. And so the question is, at what point can we have a serious conversation about Medicare and its long-term liability, or a serious question about a serious conversation about Social Security, or a serious conversation about budget and debt, in which we're not simply trying to position ourselves politically. That's what I'm committed to doing. We won't agree all the time in getting it done, but I'm committed to doing it.
But I am committed to doing it. I'm Rachel Maddow here with Keith Olbermann in New York. Chris Matthews is joining us from Washington. Chris, big picture in terms of this remarkable event today. Does it change anything in Washington other than making the president look good?
Well, let's start with that last part of that answer, that question. Whenever you doubt, and I'm sure we all do, about the effectiveness of our political process, the ability to take to the top the best people in our country, and to see the long primary season, the long battle for the nomination, the long battle for the general election produces the best person. I don't know anyone else in the country that could have done what the president did today in simple ability terms. To be able to do what he did in terms of temperament, I don't have it. Keith, you and me and maybe Rachel, the temperament to put up with those questions, which were not really questions, the ability to put up with adversarial remarks, the snarkiness, the ability to think through and outthink every one of your challengers, the ability to command that kind of information, even to the point of knowing how these wars were financed through supplemental appropriations, the little bitty bits of knowledge he displayed tonight, all thrown together in this arena of a bit over an hour today, showed me that we do produce probably the best candidate and the best president we can in this system you can imagine in the world. And so I think our political process has taken to the top the person that ought to be there. And that would be my takeaway after all this today.
Yeah, well, you and I had this conversation when we went to the White House, that it was really one of those moments where you thought, well, maybe we do have one of, say, the 1,000 smartest people in the country is the President of the United States. Maybe he's number 999, maybe he's number 83, we don't know. But that sense that you have that the guy knows what he's talking about under almost all circumstances and almost all topics is overwhelming. And I think this is the entree into it. To what degree it changes anything, I would imagine we've already heard from some of them, there are Republicans who are going, what did we do that for? And, you remember this, Chris, better than as clearly as I would, if not better, the story about when Rosemary Woods was supposedly the one who erased the tapes on the White House dictaphone or whatever it was, the 18-minute gap, and for some reason, they let Newsweek into the White House to her desk to photograph her reaching back and having to do something physically impossible to erase the tapes, and it looked stupid, and it was just a disaster because it was towards the end of the Nixon presidency. Leonard Garment said afterwards, I don't know why we did that. It just, everything went wrong. And all we've seen off the record, on the record from the Republicans after this tells you what maybe will change. I don't know that's necessarily for the better. They may be saying, we're never going to get close to him again. We have to avoid him as much as possible. And we certainly can't be seen trying to negotiate with him because we're not negotiating from strength. They had 140 players on the field, and the other team had one guy, and they lost to him.
Well, I think the bigger picture of what's been happening in politics recently, though, is that things have not been going well for Obama. And it's because, in part, politics isn't usually like what it was like here today. Politics isn't usually about substantive discussions of policies where the person who's being attacked gets a chance to answer it right then and there and challenge the substantive basis on which they are being attacked. I think Obama is saying he'd like politics to be more like that, and part of the reason is because I think he thinks that would be good for the country. I think the other part of the reason is he knows it would be great for him because he wins when politics is like this. The way that if I were a Republican, what I take away from this is don't let politics be like this ever again.
Well,
at least while this guy's in
but you know exactly what Chris. You must think this is the case. Their reaction is in fact going to be, we don't know why we did this. We're not going to do this again.
You're always learning from your enemies. You are a teacher of your enemy at every moment. And I must say, Arthur Schlesinger once said something. I heard him out at Aspen say it. It was so brilliant. He said, politics, and we're watching it today in full bloom, is essentially a learning profession. You must learn every day. It's like you must learn every day from your enemies how to beat them. And this president has learned in terms of getting something done. He has to find some new way to do it. Rachel, your criticism of so far, and Pete, our criticism of them put together. There is a room for criticism with this president. He has not mastered this game yet, but I watch him learning it. And I wouldn't want to be on the other side of this learning curve because I think he is going to learn, and he's going to be better as time goes on.
Well, clearly not all news days are created equal, and this one was amazing. The President of the United States confronting a large gathering of his most vocal opponents live on national television. Its impact as it happened was to compel our attention. Its impact on the near and midterm future of American politics and governing remains to be seen. Regrettably, we are out of time tonight to talk about that, but thankfully Chris and Keith and I will be back in the near future to keep track. If you missed any of these 2 hours, though, please do stay tuned. MSNBC will re-air this program in its entirety next. I'm Rachel Maddow here in New York City with my friend Keith Olbermann. Chris Matthews has been joining us this evening from Washington, D.C.
I found Jim Henserling.
Who is it?
He's the president of the Omak Stampede, the rodeo in Omak, Washington, home of the world-famous suicide race. That's who the president thought he was talking to, Jim.
No wonder he was so confident. Thanks very much for watching. Good night and have a great weekend.